The wind howled across the Montana plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bitter cold of an unforgiving winter and something far more troubling, the sound of a woman crying on Samuel Carter's porch. Sam had lived alone in his timber cabin for the better part of 5 years, ever since his father passed and left him the ranch. He'd grown accustomed to the silence, the predictable rhythm of cattle, chores, and solitude. But nothing in his quiet existence had prepared him for the sight that greeted him when he opened his door that February morning. A young woman in a thin traveling dress, her lips blue with cold, her auburn hair matted with snow, sitting on his porch step with a worn carpet bag clutched to her chest like a lifeline. "Please," she whispered through chattering teeth. "I have nowhere else to go." Sam didn't ask questions. He simply wrapped his heavy sheepskin coat around her trembling shoulders and guided her inside, toward the warmth of his wood stove. It was only later, after she'd thawed enough to speak without her teeth chattering, that he learned her name was Eliza Thornton, and she'd traveled all the way from Boston to marry his neighbor, George Hutchins. "He took one look at me and said I wasn't what he ordered," Eliza said, staring into the tin cup of hot coffee Sam had pressed into her hands. Her voice was hollow, stripped of emotion by exhaustion and humiliation. "Said the photograph must have been from 10 years ago. Said I was too plain, too thin, too—" She trailed off, swallowing hard. "He gave me $5 and told me to find my own way back to Boston. That was 3 days ago. I've been sleeping in his barn, trying to figure out what to do. The $5 is gone spent on food. This morning, he found me and threw me out into the snow." Sam felt anger rise in his chest, hot and fierce. George Hutchins was known throughout the county as a hard man, but this was cruelty beyond measure. "You can stay here," he said simply, "long as you need." Eliza's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly impose. It's not an imposition. It's the right thing to do." Sam stood, uncomfortable with the gratitude shining in her eyes. "I've got a spare room. It's small, but it's warm. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." That night, lying in his own bed with a stranger sleeping under his roof, Sam wondered what he'd gotten himself into. He was a simple man at 28 years old, weathered by hard work and harsh seasons, more comfortable with horses than people. The idea of sharing his space, his routine, his carefully constructed solitude, unsettled him. But the alternative of turning her out into the colder was unthinkable. The next morning, Sam woke to the smell of bacon frying and fresh coffee brewing. He found Eliza in his kitchen, her hair neatly braided, wearing the same traveling dress but with an apron tied over it. She'd found his meager supplies and was making the most of them. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly, seeing his expression. "I wanted to make myself useful, to earn my keep, at least for a few days until I can." "No, you don't owe me anything," Sam interrupted. "Everyone owes something," Eliza replied softly. "My father taught me that. He was a preacher in Boston. Died 2 years ago, along with my mother, in a typhoid outbreak. I had no other family, no prospects. The mail order arrangement seemed like my only option." She set a plate of bacon and eggs in front of him. "I should have known it was too good to be true. Who wants a 26-year-old spinster with no dowry and no beauty to speak of?" Sam looked at her then, really looked at her. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. Her features were too sharp, her frame too angular. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet strength and intelligence, that struck him as far more valuable than mere prettiness. "George Hutchins is a fool," he said gruffly, and began to eat. As February melted into March, an unexpected rhythm developed in the cabin. Eliza proved herself capable and resourceful. She mended Sam's clothes, which had been patched so many times they were more patched than original fabric. She organized his chaotic pantry, experimented with his limited ingredients to create surprisingly good meals, and even helped him with the early spring chores when the weather permitted. Sam, in turn, taught her about ranch life. He showed her how to read the sky for coming weather, how to handle a rifle for protection against predators, how to calm a spooked horse with gentle words and steady hands. They worked side by side in a companionable silence that Sam found more comfortable than he'd ever expected. But it was the evenings that changed everything. After supper, they would sit by the fire, Sam whittling or mending tack, Eliza reading aloud from his small collection of books. Her voice was melodious, bringing life to stories Sam had read a dozen times before. She read him Mark Twain and Washington Irving, poetry by Longfellow, and editorials from old newspapers. They discussed ideas, debated politics, shared memories of their different childhoods, hers in the bustling city, his on the wild frontier. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Eliza asked one evening in late March, looking up from a volume of Emerson's essays. Sam considered the question. "I used to think I preferred it," he admitted. "After Pa died, it seemed easier to be alone than to risk losing anyone else." He paused, suddenly aware of how much that had changed. "But I reckon I was just scared." "Scared of what?" "Of caring too much. Of needing someone." He met her eyes across the firelight. "Of them leaving." Eliza set down her book. "I understand that fear. When my parents died, I swore I'd never let myself be that vulnerable again. I'd never need anyone so much that losing them would destroy me." She smiled sadly. "And yet here I am, having traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger, hoping for exactly that kind of connection. We're contradictory creatures, aren't we?" "I suppose we are." April brought the first real warmth, and with it, a problem Sam had been dreading. Eliza had recovered her strength, proven her independence, and saved enough money from selling her skilled needlework in town to afford passage back to Boston. The time had come for her to leave. "I've booked passage on the train next week," she announced one morning, her voice carefully neutral. "I've written to a former neighbor in Boston. She runs a boarding house and says she can give me work as a seamstress." Sam felt something crack inside his chest. "That's good," he managed. "That's real good." The week passed too quickly. Sam found himself memorizing small details he'd never noticed before. The way Eliza hummed while she worked, the precise way she folded laundry into perfect squares, the sound of her laughter when he told her stories about his childhood mishaps. The cabin, which had once felt like a peaceful sanctuary, now felt too quiet whenever she left a room. 2 days before her departure, Sam rode into town for supplies and encountered George Hutchins at the general store. The man had the audacity to smirk at him. "I hear you've been harboring my discarded goods," George said loudly enough for the other customers to hear. "Hope you didn't pay full price for her. She's damaged merchandise, too old, too opinionated, too." Sam's fist connected with George's jaw before he'd consciously decided to throw the punch. The man went down hard, and Sam stood over him, breathing heavily. "You speak about her with respect, or you don't speak about her at all," Sam said quietly. "She's worth 10 of you, 20. And if I ever hear you've said one more word against her, we'll have more than words between us." The sheriff, who'd witnessed the whole exchange, simply nodded at Sam and helped George to his feet. "I'd take his advice if I were you, George. Now get out of here before I decide to arrest you for disturbing the peace." That evening, Sam couldn't bring himself to tell Eliza what had happened. But she noticed his scraped knuckles and gently cleaned them while he sat at the kitchen table, feeling like a fool. "You defended my honor, didn't you?" she asked softly. "He had no right to thank you." She held his hand between both of hers, examining the cuts with careful attention. "No one has ever stood up for me like that. Not even my father, God rest his soul. He was a good man, but not a strong one." Sam turned his hand to clasp hers. "Eliza, I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, her brown eyes wide and uncertain. "Don't go back to Boston." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Stay here, with me, not as hired help or out of obligation, but as—" He swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue, "as my wife, if you'll have me." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "Sam, you don't have to propose out of pity or you. It's not pity," he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "These past 2 months have been the best of my life. This cabin has never felt like a home until you were in it. I wake up looking forward to the day because I know you'll be there. I go to sleep grateful because I know you're safe under my roof. I love you, Eliza." I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe that first morning when you made breakfast, or maybe that evening you laughed at my terrible joke about the stubborn mule. Or maybe it was every small moment in between. But it happened, and it's real, and I'm asking you to stay not because you need saving, but because I need you. The tears spilled over, running down Eliza's cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been trying not to, trying to protect my heart, but I failed completely. I love your kindness, your quiet strength, the way you see me as I am and don't find me wanting. I love your terrible jokes and your worse coffee and the way you talk to the horses like they're people. I love this life we've built together, even though it was supposed to be temporary." Sam stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Then say yes. Stay with me. Let's make it permanent." "Yes," Eliza breathed against his chest. "Yes, yes. Yes." They were married the following Sunday by the circuit preacher, with half the town in attendance. The same neighbors who'd gossiped about the scandalous arrangement now celebrated the unlikely love story. Even the sheriff gave a toast at the reception held in the church hall, declaring that he'd known from the start that Sam Carter was too decent a man to let a good woman slip away. As summer bloomed across the Montana plains, Sam and Eliza built their life together. They expanded the garden, added chickens to the ranch, and talked about children they might have one day. Eliza continued her needlework, which brought in extra income and gave her a sense of purpose beyond their domestic duties. Sam found himself consulting her on ranch decisions, valuing her quick mind and different perspective. One evening in late August, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Eliza leaned against Sam's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. "If George Hutchins had been a better man, I'd be living in his house right now, probably miserable, definitely unappreciated." "I try not to think about that," Sam admitted. "Makes me too angry at what might have been lost." "But it wasn't lost. We found each other precisely because he was awful. Isn't that strange? The worst moment of my life here sitting on your porch, frozen and rejected and utterly alone, led directly to the best thing that ever happened to me." Sam pressed a kiss to her temple. "I used to think strength meant standing alone, needing no one. But real strength is opening your heart even when you're scared, letting someone in, choosing to care, even knowing you could lose them." "We won't lose each other," Eliza said fiercely. "We'll have arguments and hard times, difficult seasons and struggles. But we won't lose each other. We're choosing each other, every day. That's what makes it real." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms and the quiet certainty of their love. Sam thought about the lonely man he'd been just months ago, convinced that solitude was safety. He'd been so wrong. True safety, true strength, true joy. It all came from opening his door to a stranger and discovering that she was exactly what his heart had been waiting for. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the wind whispered through the pines. But inside the cabin, when they finally went in for the night, warmth and light awaited them. Not just from the fire in the hearth, but from the love they'd built together. A love born from kindness, nurtured by respect, and sealed with the courage to be vulnerable. Sam Carter had taken in an abandoned mail-order bride out of simple human decency, never expecting anything in return. What he discovered instead was that true love often arrives when we're not looking for it, wearing the face of someone who needs us exactly as much as we need them. And in the end, that made all the difference.